Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Queen of Fertility 33 and I'm here with some articles. I might not got enough time, I only got 8 minutes, okay? So let me see, can I do this, okay? The Slave Bible for Slavery or Salvation, that's the title. What really motivated the editors to select parts of the Holy Bible for the loose of the Negro slaves in the British West India Islands, 1807, better known as the Slave Bible that y'all read. In 2018 through 2019, I did get killed in 2018, came back. The Museum of the Bible in Evelina Museum in Washington, D.C. displayed an 1808 copy of an abridged Bible in the exhibit, The Slave Bible. Let the story be told. The temporary exhibit drew wide media coverage for a provocative claim about the publishers of the Slave Bible. They deliberately removed portions of the biblical text, such as the Exodus story, that could inspire hope for liberation. Instead, the publishers emphasized portions that justified and fortified the system of slavery that was so vital to the British Empire. Writing about the exhibit for the Smithsonian, Bridget Katz highlights another apparent suspect omission. Gone was Jeremiah 22:13. Woe unto him that built his house by unrighteousness. Okay, my daughters. They built that on my daughter's body, and his chambers by wrong, that lose his neighbor's service without wages and give him not for his work. This example and other in precisely make it seem, yes. Remember I told you Shanice built the second machine, okay, and then she thought she can the first machine and the second machine, so she thought she can run the country after that. No, baby, you could not. This example and other cause that made Gina think you trying to take her shit. You less than her in her mind. Make it you is though. Make it seem if you wasn't like that, then I probably wouldn't say you were less than her. As it would neatly exercise from the whole chapter, and really the entire book of Jeremiah was included, slavery and liberation in the slave Bible. If indeed the purpose of the slave Bible was to reinforce slavery and discourage slave uprising by downplaying the Bible's liberation message, then it would have made sense for the editors to remove any mention of liberation and include passages that could be used to support slavery. That is not what they did, however. Suppose removal of liberation themes. The editors did not remove only the Exodus account, they also removed almost all of the book of Exodus, retaining only Exodus 19 through 20, which recounts how Israel received the Decalogue as Sinai, the opening of which say, Exodus 22, I am the Lord, thy God, which had brought them out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Why would the elders retain the reference to bondage if they attempted to downplay liberation? To compound this problem, the elders also left in more than a dozen other references to the Exodus, omitting passage that was used to defend slavery. The editors also included many passages that would have been helpful in defending slavery, such as the story of Sarai giving her maidservant Hagar to Abraham to have a child by her, Genesis 16, which legitimizes concubinage. The story also offers divine sanction for the cruel treatment of slaves, and God later instructed Hagar to remain with the abusive Sarai. Paul's reference to the narrative in Galatians as a confusing metaphor for Israel is omitted as well, 4:30-31. Also absent of the law permitted enslavement of non-Israelites in Leviticus 25:45-46. A most glaring omission, and in the New Testament, Paul's short letter to Philemon that seems to acknowledge that a slave remains a slave until his owner releases him. Shit, I did it for them. These texts were often cited to support slavery in Britain and the United States. That means I assassinated my masters. I ain't gonna care about these. Included passages referenced by abolitionists. In addition, the Slave Bible retained plenty of verses that would appear to contradict its alleged pro-slavery intentions. For example, the entire chapter of Isaiah 58 is included, even though it contained this verse, Isaiah Isaiah 58:6. Is not this the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that ye break every yoke? They also left in a passage from Luke that reads, Luke 4:18. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he had anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that were bruised. The similar passage in Isaiah 61:1 also included in the Slave Bible. These verses that depict the liberation of oppressed were explicitly invoked in Poe obelisk sermons. The editor's inclusion of the Joseph narrative, Genesis 37, 39, 45, is also problematic for the pro-slavery view, and it will lose in 1700 in an early argument against slavery in New England. Although the story recounts how Joseph prospered despite being a slave, the incident where Potiphar's wife falsely accused Joseph of attempted rape also revealed the treachery of slave masters. Moreover, by the end of the story, Joseph had become in charge of the kingdom, second only to the king, and exalted over his former master and his brothers who sold him into slavery. If the editors of the Slave Bible were not motivated by a desire to justify slavery, then what was their motivation? The push to educate and evangelize slaves. In 1783, the Bishop of London, Billy Porter, delivered a sermon before the Society of the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts, SPG, calling upon the leaders to reconsider the treatment of slaves on SPG's plantation in Barbados. These demands were dismissed as impractical by the plantation managers, but Porter's abolitionist sentiment did not seem to harm his relationship with SPG, and he would be invited back to preach at a similar service. In 1794, if it click off, y'all, I'm going to do part 2. I'm going to just put it together. Porter founded the Society for Conversion and Religious Instruction and Education of the Negro Slaves in the British West India Island, whose missionary and educational purpose is evident from its name. The Society produced the Slave Bible in 1807, formerly titled Select Parts of the Holy Bible for the Use of the Negro Slaves in the British West India Island. Missionary work on the plantations. The Society's missionaries were sent to live on or near plantations in order to educate slaves in the Christian faith, but they could only do so with the permission of the plantation owner, the Caban, who would have economic and practical concerns. Sunday church services and the expectation to refrain from labor on the Lord's Day would have presented significant problems for the slaves. They normally had Sunday free from mandatory work, but was in effect forced to lose their free time to provide sustenance for themselves by trading in a market and working small portions of land allotted to them by the plantation owner. This removed parts of the owner's onus of providing for their slaves, but it forced some slaves to choose between starving and attending church. What I tell y'all? In 1808, letters to the governor and plantation owners in the British West Indies, Portis, makes an expression appear for continued amelioration. He wants Sundays to be completely devoted to worship the Bible study, so he asked the owners if they could allow their slaves a few hours or another week. Okay, part 2. On another weekday to work their own allotments and to go to the market. Anticipating the capitalist pushback, Porter argues two things. First, they are profaning the Lord's Day with work and trade, and secondly, if they correct this error, then God will bless them and their slaves will be happier and more productive. In a solemn, remember I told you when you are trafficked, they throw parties for you, okay, if you done did good, if you done got a certain amount, okay? In a similar rhetoric move, Porter, because I've been in that situation, I'm always the first one to make over my amount in sex trafficking. Porter explains that the byproduct of conversion will be a greater number of children because Christians somehow produce more children. It's a win-win. The slaves get Jesus and the owners The slaves get Jesus, which is me, and the owners get more slaves. Christianity makes better slaves. In his letter, Porteous also anticipates two objections to everlasting education. The first is that if the slaves learn to read, they might encounter literature that will incite rebellion. True. Porteous is not referring to the Bible here, but to newspapers or pamphlets which might encourage such actions. News about the 1804 revolution against French control that ended slavery in Haiti. Yeah, when I started Terrell, my grandma died. That's why I stopped for a while. Yeah, Porteous suggests that reading will allow the slaves to understand both sides of the argument. Well, they killed her spirit, so she wasn't in my life no more, because I killed seeing her spirit, rather than being passive listeners to the same seditious material. The second objection to everlasting is the idea that Christianity makes bad slaves, who are prideful and less submissive. Ooh, that's me. Porter responds, can the religion of the meek and humble Jesus, that religion which above all things inculcates humility, content, patience, subordination, can that produce ambition, pride, discontent, and resistance to lawful authorities? In his opinion, as a bishop, Christianity in fact makes better slaves because the faith most expressly enjoins them under pain of God's displeasure here and of the severe punishments hereafter to be subject to their masters without fear. Okay. Well, I can't speak for that because I was born before y'all, but I even knew people that were born after, and they still didn't do what the masters wanted them to do. So it is difficult to know if this is only a rhetoric move for Porteous, as it appears to run against the grain of his abolitionist sentiments. What is evident from this letter, however, is that Porter believed in the efficacy of his rhetoric, that such racist and paternalist arguments will be welcomed and embraced by Christian slave owners. Thinking critically about how the Bible alludes, though tantalizing, the claims by the Museum of the Bible about the pro-slavery purpose behind the slave Bible and the rational and canonical sources of the editors are overstated and likely arise from the museum analytical anxiety to keep the Bible good. The work does, however, allow us to think critically about the complex and conflicting ways a sacred text can be used to promote human flourishing and deny people their basic human rights. The slave Bible was a mythical tool shaped by white missionaries to convert and educate slaves. Though its origins were rooted in the abolitionism of the missionary society which produced it, the work sits within a wider cultural context that tolerated and in many cases approved of the institution of slavery. Contrary to its portrayal by the Museum of the Bible, the editors of the Slave Bible did not remove deliberate portions of emphasis servitude. They did not need to. A continued benefit to the conversion of slaves, and one which would have been reassuring to white Christian slave owners, was that the Christian faith was understood to emphasize certain virtues favorable to slavery. The two institutions, church and slavery, were not a necessary contradiction in the minds of those in the pews and on the plantations. In the harsh light of history, we may see the efforts of this missionary society quite differently. Rather than attempting to provide excuses for them or the faith they claim, we must make an effort to wrestle with the complexity of our own histories and our community's complicity in racism. The content of the Slave Bible. The Slave Bible contains selections from the King James Version or Authorized Version of the 14 of the 66 books that make up the Protestant canon. This equates to roughly 10% of the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, and almost 50% of the New Testament. The Slave Bible's Old Testament. In contrast to what the Museum of the Bible exhibit suggests, Christological and ever-listed themes drive the selection of many of the texts from the Old Testament. And this is what they call Genesis 1 through 3, 6 through 8, 18, 37, 39 through 45. The creation and flood accounts. Abraham plead to Yahweh to spare Sodom and Gomorrah, and Joseph's story. Sodom and Gomorrah is here in Jill. Okay, when we do a video on them, just let me know. Job 1 through 3, 38 through 39, and 42. Portalu, God's first speech to Job Ebalu. Proverbs 1 through 24, Proverbs of Solomon, Word of the Sages, Obits chapters 25 to 31, Exodus 19:20, the Deuteronomy of Sinai, Exodus whole book, Deuteronomy 4 through 6, 8 through 11, and 28, the Dauphiny, the exhortation to obey God's law and blessings and curses, Isaiah 1:5, 9:1 through 7, 11, 14, 40, 42, 44 through 45, 47, 51, 53, 55, 58, and 60 through 61. Select poems, many of which have been interpreted in Christian theology and Messianic. 1 Samuel 17:24, David and Goliath. David refuses to kill Saul. Daniel 1 through 9, Court Legends and Visions, Obits chapter 10 through 12, 1 Kings 3:8, 17 through 18, 21, The Wisdom of Solomon, Temple Dedication, Stories of Elijah, Ahab and Jezebel, Hosea 6:11 through 14, Calls to Repentance and God's paternal love for Israel, 2 Kings 4:5, Story of Elisha with an E, Joel 1:2, Judgment and Restoration of Judah, Omens chapter 3, Mark chapter 4, and 1 Chronicles 17, God's promise of the Davidic dynasty. The purpose of the Slave Bible, selections from Genesis and Exodus, becomes evident if we compare it to an everlasting religious tract from this period that summarizes these two books in nearly the same way. Structured as a series of dialogue between a missionary and a slave, the tract, Christian Direction and Instruction for Negroes, aims to recount the fall of man and what followed thereupon till the coming of Christ. The Slave Bible also emphasizes the value of wisdom and proper Christian living in its inclusion of the main section of Job, much of Proverbs, and the whole of Exodus, the Isaiah portions, as well as the selection from Hosea and Joel, are often Masonic until the day when Yahweh will send a deliverer to save his people. For example, the editor included a portion of a chapter in Isaiah 9:1 through 7, which Christian tradition interpreted as a Masonic prophecy. Isaiah 9 through 6, For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. The remainder of the chapter 8 through 21, Mark, MT 7 through 20, Matthew, deals with the northern kingdom of Israel, but these verses may have been selected due to their importance within Christianity, as this passage is echoed throughout the New Testament and the child is understood within a Christian frame of reference to be Jesus Christ. The Slave Bible also includes brief summaries at the head of each chapter, modeled after the longer summaries in the King James Version. These summaries support the Christological emphasis of the work, as parts of the Bible are described as speaking of Christ in the Gospel. For example, the summary for the servant song and hymn is Isaiah 42 reads, The office of Christ, God's promise to him, an exhortation to praise God. The numbers in the summary correspond to verse numbers in the chapter. The Slave Bible's New Testament. This selection from the New Testament includes the full Gospel of Matthew and Luke, except from the Gospel of John and the entire book of Acts, thus covering nearly the whole of the actual narrative of Jesus' life and the formation of the early church. In selection from the epistles, the editors forced on the most universal calls to holiness, righteousness, and Christian love, rather than the theological dense section of Paul's letter. So, Matthew, whole book, selections from the letters to various Christian communities. Luke, the whole book. John 4 through 5, 11, 13, 19, 21, episodes of the Samaritan woman, healing on the Sabbath, restoration of Lazarus, Jesus foretelling his betrayal, Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. Romans 12 through 13, 1 Corinthians 1 3 through 13, 15, 2 Corinthians 4 through 5, Galatians 1 5 through 6, Ephesians 4 through 6, Philippians 2 4 1, Thessalonians 4 5, 1 Timothy 1 through 2 2, Timothy 2 through 4, Titus 2 through 3, Hebrews 1 through 3, 12 and 13, James 1 3 5, 1 Peter whole book, and 1 John 3, and Acts the whole book, the founding and early history of the Christian church. Okay, so there y'all go. Enjoy.